Okay, let me bring up the text for today. Share screen. There we go. Okay, good morning, everyone. I hope you all had a nice weekend. I hope you're all well. We are up to the last two seifim of the first siman in the Rab Shulchan Aruch. And the last two halachos, again, have to do with shlichus, have to do with proxyship and taking care of someone else's assets and acting responsibly with those assets. So the first one that we're going to see today has to do with an apotropos. If a person is a custodian, a guardian over the assets of orphans. And remember what we had seen before about an apotropos is that he has to take special care because the orphans themselves are considered to not have sufficient knowledge to be able to control their own estate. So we had learned that an apotropos is not permitted to purchase items even if he has to sell certain assets of the estate in order to sustain the orphans. He's not allowed to make those purchases himself because it might appear as if he's giving himself a special deal, and there's an obligation for him to be above suspicion. So here's another halacha with an apotropos having to do with risk taking. He writes the Shulchan. This is really a quote from the Shulchan Aruch. Va'asur la'apotropos lahachnis choros hayesomim b'safek sakana, afal pi shehu osechein b'shalo. It is not permitted for an apotropos to take risks with the assets of the orphans, even if he's prepared to do the same for himself. Okay, now, of course, anytime you invest, you are taking risks. So it's a very broad statement which has a certain amount of vagueness to it, because what does that mean? You can't take any risks with the assets of the Yisomim, even if you would be prepared to do it with your own assets. Well, let's see. What's the example? Lefichach lo yishlach schorasam b'derech yam, shahayam nosein b'shefa v'notel b'shefa. He says, therefore, you're not allowed to export merchandise of orphans using the ocean. In other words, if you can sell their property without sending it overseas, you're obligated to do so. And the reason why is because the ocean provides it gives you with great profit, and it takes away with great profit. Meaning that if you're successful in overseas trade, you'll be very successful. But if you fail in overseas trade, you can fail miserably. And so therefore, the risk is not justifiable. You might say, I'm prepared to take the risk myself, but you cannot take it on behalf of innocent children who do not have the ability to authorize you to do so. So obviously, if you're investing for an adult, as long as you disclose the amount of risk that they are taking, and you let them know what the risks are, so then it's up to them to decide whether they would like to invest with you or not. But if you're doing it on behalf of an estate where there's no opportunity for the owner of those assets to voice their opinion properly, so then you don't have a right to take those risks. Another example that the Shulchan Aruch gives is velo b'derech sheyesh ba safek listim, to send the merchandise on a road where there's a rumor that there may be highwaymen or robbers who could hijack the wagon train, just like in the old westerns, where people would be traveling out to the west, and all of a sudden the guys in the black hats would come and attack the wagon train. And all of these examples are are examples of where you're not allowed to take undue risks with the assets of orphans. So, well, how would that translate into the modern world? Well, it's difficult really to say. It has to be something where the market, or the financial markets, acknowledges something extremely speculative. For those of us who have ever invested with an investment broker, one of the first questions they ask you is how risk averse are you? How much would you like to risk? Because the greater the risk, the greater the potential gain, but also the greater the potential loss. So, and it's a sliding scale, So apparently you have to just be very conservative with the assets of Yisomim, even though the return is going to be less. But then there's an exception, and he says, and the Shulchan Aruch writes that the exception is as follows: Ela im kain hu yayin, she'im yishenu kan ad she'yimocher yesh lachus shana yachmitz. He says the only time that you can take significant risk with the assets of Yisomim is if it's a perishable commodity, such that if you were to not export it overseas, and not take risk in trying to sell it, it could spoil. So the example that he gives is wine. Let's say these children, their father passed away, and he was a big wine merchant, and he left over an entire warehouse of wine, of barrels of wine, and it was known that the father had exported this merchandise in order to sell it and make a profit. If you would not go ahead and sell the wine by exporting it overseas, there may not be enough within the local market to be able to sell it off in time before it perishes, before it spoils. And therefore, in those situations, it is permitted for the custodian to take the risk to send it on long journeys. Areza osa kederch osa b'shalo. So then you're permitted to take those risks, provided that you would take those risks if it was your own assets. V'chein kol kayotze bazeh, and the same holds true in all similar kinds of situations. And obviously, there's a lot of wiggle room here, depending upon the situation. But ultimately, it depends. What a custodian has to attempt to do is to maximize the profits for the Yisomim without exposing them to undue risk. Okay. There's no Imrei Yaakov commentary over here because it's a fairly straightforward halacha. Anyone want to say anything, comment, question? If not, we'll go on to the next halacha. I do believe that someone had raised the issue of risk when it came to the assets of Yisomim. I believe someone had raised that question, but the Rav Shulchan Aruch addresses that directly. Next halacha, Yud Zayin. Now we go back to the laws of Shlichus to finish off the chapter. Hanose mos lechavero liknos lo karka o metaltalin, v'holach v'kona la'atzmo b'ma'os shalo. A guy sends a shaliach, he sends his friend to go purchase for him real estate or chattel. And the shaliach, when he gets to the destination, realizes that this deal is too good for him to pass up for himself. And he so therefore decides to go ahead and buy it for himself. And he uses his own cash. So Hareza Ramai. This person is a Ramai, which means that he is a fraud. He is deceitful. Now, what does that mean? He's a fraud. B'di'evid, what he did is legal, but he's not a very ethical character. Okay, so b'di'evid, what he did is legal. If he was going to ask a shaila, and the shaila was, can I buy it myself? The answer would be no, you can't buy it yourself. You were sent in good faith to purchase this for your friend. He even informed you about this opportunity, and he trusted you to buy it for him. That's why he disclosed it to you, because you told him you were going there, and you offered to do him a favor, and now you want to buy the merchandise yourself. That's horrible ethics. So what is the exception to that rule? The exception is as follows: V'im hamocher eno misratza limkar la'mishaleach muter liknos la'atzmo. But let's say the merchant is not willing to sell it to the guy who sent me. I was sent by my friend Yankel. Yankel sends me to go ahead and buy him some merchandise. The merchant isn't interested in selling to Yankel, either because he doesn't like Yankel, or he has a policy that he doesn't sell to third parties unless he knows who they are. And he doesn't know Yankel. He knows me, the guy who's standing in front of him. So in that situation, since there's no other alternative other than to let the merchandise go, I as the shaliach, am allowed to buy it for myself personally. Umikol makom, tzarich lahudia tchila lameshalchel kedei shelo yachshedenu. But in that situation, the ethical thing to do is to notify the person who sent me, notify Yankel, and let him know, listen, I can't buy it for you. The guy's not letting me sell it to you. The guy's not willing to sell his item or his merchandise or his real estate to you. He'll only sell it to me. I just need to let you know that because I'm not trying to swindle you. I'm not trying to get you out of the deal, but I just want you to know that he refuses to sell it to you. And then even that has a qualification. Let's say you're worried that by the time you go back to notify Yankel, who sent you to make the purchase, but in that interim period, someone else will buy it because this is before the age of telephones, of cell phones. So then you're permitted to make the purchase even without notifying Yankel, and you can make the purchase for yourself. And you can therefore tell him afterwards. The imkana b'mos hamishaleach chayav litin lo hamekach afal pi shekanahu la'atzmo. And now let's say when you went ahead and made the purchase, you used Yankel's money to make the purchase. The seller was not willing to sell it to Yankel. He said, I'm only selling it to you. But then you went ahead and all you had was Yankel's money. So in that situation, you would have to relinquish the item or the property over to Yaakov because you purchased it with his money and therefore it's rightfully his. So that would create a dilemma for you, obviously, because if the merchant said, I'm only selling it to you, I'm not selling it to any third party, so then you're purchasing it for yourself, at least in the eyes of the merchant. But in reality, you're using Yankel's money, so you have to, in that point, give it over to Yankel. Yankel has a right to demand that you give it to him. Even if you want to pay him back, it seems from the Rav Shulchan Aruch that you're obligated to relinquish the merchandise to him. Okay. All right.
Rabbi, can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
Why would you not be obligated to make that side agreement with the original person after you've done this trade with the vendor who doesn't want to sell to a third party? Like, why wouldn't you just have to make it good? Just buy it as the vendor wants, and then go back to the original sender and complete the deal with him.
Well, all you don't have any money yourself, is what the case is over here. Mm-hmm. You use the money of the dispatcher, of Yankel, okay? And therefore, what the Rav Shulchan Aruch is essentially saying, in that case, you have to surrender the goods to Yankel. You can't say, since the guy didn't want to sell it to a third party, I'll go ahead and I'll give you my own money.
So at the end of the day, the person who sent you gets what they want. You're just obliging the seller by saying, fine, I'll buy it from you. But it's kind of transparent at the end.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Rabbi, is there any difference if the person who sent you made a stipulation in terms of price? In other words, if I send somebody and I say, buy whatever, I don't want to pay more than $10 a unit, and he comes and the shliach sees that it's a great deal and the guy wants $11 a unit, is he allowed to buy it, or does he have to go back and say something?
You mean if it's the Mishaleach's money, if it's Yankel's money, the guy who sent him? It would seem, well, In a normal situation, it would seem like he doesn't have the right. He'd have to go back and ask him. He'd have to persuade the dispatcher that you don't realize that the market has changed since you told me to buy it for $10 a unit, and you really need to know that at $11 a unit it's still considered a deal, because everywhere else they're selling it for $15 a unit. I guess you'd have to prevail upon him first and try to convince him of that.
Even if it was your own money?
Oh, if it's your own money, then you can buy it yourself. And then you can say to the guy, if you don't want it, then, but you have to be prepared to have to keep the goods. You can't force the dispatcher to take it in that situation, because he said, I only want to pay $10 a unit.
Right. No, I'm saying if I decide that I myself want to buy it at $11 a unit because I think it's a great deal and I use my own money, I should be fine that way.
Yeah, you should be fine that way, for sure. That for sure you should be okay, because the guy told you only to spend $10 a unit. He may be a little bit upset once he discovers that really $11 a unit is still a bargain, and he may be upset with you. He might say to you, well, if you knew that I was lowballing it and I didn't really understand the market, then why didn't you notify me? Why didn't you just buy it on my behalf? Or why didn't you just buy it and then offer me the opportunity to buy it from you? You know, I'm sure this goes on a lot when people go to China, right? And they do purchases there. But hopefully people won't be going to China that much anymore. Anyway, let's take a look at the Imrei Yaakov in Hareze Ramai, the person who goes ahead and purchases the item for the shaliach, who goes ahead and purchases the item for himself instead of buying it for his dispatcher. He's considered to be deceitful. He says a person is a ramai if he goes ahead and purchases it for himself instead of purchasing it for Yankel. But here's another scenario. What if he ends up just not doing the purchase at all? He tells his friend, I'm going to China. You want me to buy anything for you? I'm doing my own business. Can I help you out with anything that you need for your business? And the guy says, yeah, while you're there, do me a favor, buy 1,000 widgets for me. And for whatever reason, he ends up not doing it. He got sidetracked, he got distracted, he forgot, whatever it is. Ein lo alav elatar umos velo mikri rama. The guy's not called deceitful. He's not called a trickster, dishonest. He decided not, because at any time a person can turn down his shlichus. Now, this is where he's not being compensated for his effort. Obviously, if he's being compensated for his effort and he doesn't go ahead and do what he was hired to do, he has to return the money that he took for this back to his dispatcher. But there could be certain situations where, as a result of not making the purchase, the dispatcher incurred a loss, because I had a special opportunity to make a huge profit by making the purchase at that particular day, at that particular time. And I sent you believing that you would take care of it for me, and you failed to do it. And as a result, now I can't, I've lost a tremendous amount of opportunity. I stood to make a killing on a certain commodity if you would have made that purchase for me. And now that you didn't make that purchase for me, I'm out of a huge amount of profit. And by the way, if anyone can ever think of good examples for these things, please feel free to chime in. There's a certain commodity that I sent you to buy, and you didn't buy it, and now the market has just gone up tremendously. Stockbrokers, sometimes, if a stockbroker, let's say, I authorize him to purchase a particular commodity or a stock, and he just neglects to do so, There are times when even halachically I can sue him because that's his job, and I was reliant upon him to make that purchase, and he failed to do so. So that's definitely a halachic issue. It's definitely a halachic issue. If you had made the purchase for me on that particular day, I would have made $100,000. And now, because you didn't make the purchase for me, the market shot up because of some news announcement, and now I've lost out on that opportunity. Even the shaliach would have to give you some kind of legitimate reason why he wasn't able to make the purchase. But if it was pure negligence, there are times when you have even legal recourse to sue him for the loss of profit. Now, the imnasam lechavero mos liknos lo dolarim. So Rav Stern goes back to his 1980-something case of where you send a friend in Israel and you ask him to purchase dollars for you. V'halonis atzel eze yamin v'lo kana. And your friend, for whatever reason, he doesn't go ahead and make the dollars purchase today. He waits a few days. And by the time he waited a few days, the dollar value went up. You need more shekels now. You could, it used to be that, let's say, you needed 10 shekels to buy a dollar. Now you need 12 shekels to buy a dollar, right? And now, all of a sudden, the person who gave you his shekels is out of pocket because you didn't go ahead and buy the dollars when the dollars were still low. So Yankel has lost out. He says, however, that's not a reason to hold the shaliach liable. Why? Because how was the shaliach to know that there was going to be a reduction in the market in such a short amount of time? In other words, that the value of shekels would go down. The shaliach felt that the market was stable. In other words, unless you make it absolutely clear to the shaliach that you need him to make the purchase for you immediately, you can't hold the shaliach liable if he tarries because with the assumption that I thought that the market was stable. I didn't realize that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity specifically on this day. So therefore, in the case that Rav Stern provides, where you ask someone to do a money exchange for you, how's he supposed to know that the shekel value is going to drop? Okay, and this again is a subjective kind of situation where it depends on the current market, right? There was a time when the shekel was very weak compared to the dollar, and it was a period of great inflation. So it was known that every day that you wait, your shekel is decreasing in value. So in an unstable kind of market like that, so then it could be that the dispatcher does have a grievance against the shaliach, because the shaliach should have known on his own that when you send him to make a money exchange, he's got to know that we're dealing with an unstable currency, and you've got to do it right away. But if the assumption is that the currency is relatively stable and it's doesn't fluctuate every couple of days, but it only fluctuates every few weeks, so then there's no reason for the shaliach to feel that he's got to do it immediately, and therefore you can't hold him liable in the event that between the time that you gave him the shekels and the time that he actually purchases the dollar is stronger against the shekel has become weaker. How was he supposed to know? And obviously, again, very subjective kind of situation, depending upon the particular market in question. And you would have to bring this to the attention of the Beis Din. The Beis Din would have to do its due diligence in trying to ascertain what kind of market you're dealing with. Is it a volatile market? Is it a stable market? If it's a volatile market and the shaliach should have known, and he tarried a few days, So then he's the one responsible. Again, sort of like a stockbroker, right? If he waits a day or two before making the purchase, and in that time the profit margin was reduced, so then you have a valid complaint against him. But if it was a stable market and there was no way for him to know because you hadn't disclosed to him that you wanted it specifically on that day, so then he's not going to be held responsible.
Rabbi,
yeah.
Would the Imrei Yaakov say the same thing if the market went the other way under the same scenario? That the dispatcher now owns the excess shekel, for an example?
Well, it's the money of the dispatcher. It's his money. So there's no way that the shaliach can say he's not able to say I get to keep the profit. It just happens to be that the shaliach's laziness ended up benefiting the mishaleach, but that doesn't give the shaliach the right to tarry if it's a volatile market. It doesn't give him a right. The shaliach can't be speculative with someone else's money. If the mishaleach says, please buy dollars for me, and it's a volatile market, then the assumption is that he wants it done right away. Even if the shaliach may feel that by waiting, the shekel market may go up, the shekel may go up in value, he doesn't have a right to tarry unless he gets express permission from the mishaleach. Okay. All right. So any questions, comments? All right. So I think we'll hold it here for today. We finished now chapter 1, and we're getting ready to go on to a new topic, which is called Dine Ona'a Ugnevas Das, the laws of Ona'a. And as we mentioned, Ona'a has two definitions. One is financial and one is verbal, and the deception that leads to a loss of gain for another party through deception. These are much more clear-cut prohibitions, and we'll start that in Yirtzeh Hashem tomorrow. All right, everyone have a great day.
Take care, gentlemen.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Be well.
Okay, have a great day.
Thank you.